Hey everybody, this is Tamara. Welcome to Tam Psych Advice. And today we're going to talk about, are you a typical MBTI type? Like a cookie cutter version of it? Or are you unique and special in some kind of way? Or do you have an it factor? Some people are so typical that I meet them over and over again and they remind me of someone. Their mannerisms. And what's funny is that even though there could be cultural differences, the two people will begin to look alike, even though they have completely different features. Has that ever happened to you? When that does happen to me, it'll start to drive me absolutely nuts because I'm like, who is this person? I've seen her before. Or who is he? I've seen him before. And I could spend all day not knowing what their MBTI type is yet. You know, like let's say it's someone new or someone that you see on TV. And I'm like, I've seen that person before. And I will rack my brains until I figure out who that person is. And then I'll start matching what their MBTI type could be. In other words, Sally is acting just like Jane, or Ben is acting just like David. And I put those two people together. I'm like, oh, okay, they're the same MBTI. But it's interesting because they'll have the same mannerisms. And what's interesting is a lot of times they'll have the same Enneagram as well. And some MBTI types tend to be prone to certain certain Enneagram types. You know what I'm saying? Like ENFJs may typically be like a 3, I think is kind of common, or, you know, there's like 2 or 3 other ones that they might be. What would be unusual would be like an ENFJ who's the asserter on the Enneagram. That's really unusual. And that's why I made my video on mirror types, ENFJs and looking like ENTJ, something like that. Is because that ENFJ, is it because they have that asserter Enneagram on top of them, or are they really truly an ENTJ? I don't know. Check that video out. So occasionally I'll meet someone and I'm not sure what their type is. They are not typical or true to type. I think one of the easiest Enneagrams to spot is an Enfp. They usually follow, they just act the same generally. But there have been times when I couldn't quite tell, is this an INFP or an ENFP? Weird, because ENFPs usually jump off the page at me, and I think I've struggled the hardest with making ENFP videos because it's like, it's in my head. How do I share information about that type? It's weird. Easiest to spot, most difficult for me to put into words. But anyway, speaking of typical types, not typical types, once I met 2 women who worked closely with each other. They shared an office. And they were totally different types, and yet they both had a very distinct walk. No, they didn't walk exactly like each other, but still, they both had a very deliberate, seemingly on purpose walk and stance that stood out to me. The walk said, I like me. I like my position. I'm all that. I'm in control. I'm on top. But they would all, you know how like you see runway models, and not that I'm saying that they, well, let me just not say anything. Well, anyway, kind of like how, okay, you know how like a runway model, like when they are walking, they stop and they might pose. Or let's say you're trying to walk like a model. What would you do? You would stop at the end and you would do this little pose. That's what they did. It's like, no matter where they were walking, when they stopped, they would do this thing, like they would shoot their hip out and their foot would turn to an angle, and I just thought, golly, they are totally imitating each other. I started to think that there was something else going on. But in addition to that, it made them difficult to type because they were imitating each other, even though their personalities were different. I started feeling like with one particular one that there were actually some other issues going on, like some psychological type things. Possibly, maybe one didn't quite know who she was, and so she was kind of becoming the other one in an interesting sort of way. Sometimes that is a clue that there's something else going on. Not always. I'm not saying, sometimes there are people that just stomp me. I don't know what their personality type is. It's probably because they have an unusual Enneagram or something like that. So it's not that. But sometimes it can be a clue that there could be maybe some type of personality disorder thing going on. But I struggled to figure out their types because they were emulating each other, even though there was something different in their personalities. Another thing I look at is, what's the person's flow? Is it music, poetry, teaching, dancing, theories, science, ministering, prophesying? For me, it's when I'm counseling with someone and a whole lot of beneath the surface stuff comes flying out of nowhere. When I can link something seemingly unrelated things that drive someone's behavior, and I can start to piece things together like a puzzle. I get into my flow and I can help them in a way that's more satisfying to them. That's when I flow. It feels like the Holy Spirit speaking through me. By the way, what's your flow? Like, what causes you to get into your zone? Most people have a zone that they sink into. They actually get into a zone and become incredible and high. And that's what happens to me when I'm really counseling someone. That piece can throw someone's type off, like what they're good at. It can be so totally different from one's type, or typically the same. So the two ladies I referred to earlier, one had traits of an ISFJ and an ESTP, which is kind of weird, right? Because I'm like, okay, is Lady A an ISFJ or an ESTP? And then the other one seemed to be an ESFP and an ESFJ, but she had an intensity in her eyes that was unlike either. So you see what I mean? Those are totally different. So that kind of gives you a picture of why I felt like there's something that's not typical about either one of them, because these types aren't even in the same temperament. They're not even in the same temperament family. So what in the world is going on here? She also had, one of them had a sing-songy kind of playful way of approaching people that was a little less aggressive than the ESFJ-ish type, and a way of not staying still and zigzagging from one person to another. I watched her take charge of several situations like an ESFJ, but was it because she was an oldest born? Oldest borns can take over any MBTI and take charge and throw the type totally off. Same thing can happen when you tack on a middle child or youngest child. Youngest children typically can be quite funny. So attach that to a very serious MBTI type, and watch how it throws that type off. So you might want to check out my birth order video to flesh this out a little bit more. The ISFJ / ESTP lady was described by most, as very serious but nice, and yet she was constantly throwing out these one-liners that would take you off guard and crack you up. Some Ps are raised by Js. In other words, some perceivers are raised by judgers and take on a more rigid, scheduled approach to life. But does that create self-hatred or more satisfaction in life? I remember an Enfp that I met. She said that she hated herself, but her mother seemed to be more of a J on the Enneagram, like more structured, wanting things settled, really tough on her. And the way she operated was definitely more like a J. Like she didn't, she was gonna put closure to things, and do things kind of straight in a line. And I think that's because she was very much influenced by a judger. So that can really impact who you become, who your parents are, what their MBTI type is. I should do a video on that, huh? I recently met a guy who was super hyper, and he said his mother was the same way, getting 1,000 things done at once, juggling a million different things at the same time, flying around everywhere, and I could tell he greatly admired that quality. I knew he was an ENFJ when, before I could finish my thought, he already knew it. And he was actually saying what I was gonna say before I said it. And I'm like, wow, how did he know that that's what I was gonna say? I stopped short and I asked, you know what my thought is? And he said, exactly, I do. So cool, right? I remember arguing with a lady whose husband is an ENTP, and she was insistent that he was a J. And I was insistent that no, the little weird picture in my head tells me he is an ENTP. He does not act like an ENTJ whatsoever. But she was like, well, I'm all over the place and I like chaos. And he is super structured, like just even the way he would go and get groceries every month, and just everything, she just said typical. I mean, not typical, but she felt like he acted like a J. But to me, the way he lived his personal life, the way he operated, the way he kind of bounced from thing to thing, was still an ENTP, but he had judging military parents. And so he was influenced by that J, and so that could throw them off. But when you look at a lot of famous people, they may not be typical. One thing that can throw a person's type off is like if they're Enneagram 4, because Enneagram 4s are artistic, or they're individualistic. And so they want to be different. They want to be unique. And so that can make it difficult to type someone if they have developed some interesting, unique characteristics and qualities. So have you ever met someone and you just could not figure out their friggin' type? Let us know in the comment section below.
You're like me. When you're feeling down in a crappy mood, it's hard to get out of it by simply thinking happy thoughts, especially these days. Check out my jewelry at the Etsy link below. You'll be amazed at how good it feels to wear something that shifts your mood and lifts your spirit. Imagine wearing something fun and feeling better at the same time.
Check out my book, The Workplace Narcissist by Tamara Hunter Zyon on Amazon. Bye.